So with that, I'd like to introduce Marilu Hastings, and let's give her a warm West Texas welcome.
Hello. Good evening to everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Lewis, for that long list of things that I forgot that I do. But I'd like to thank Sol Ross, Lewis, and Billy for hosting us tonight. I'd like to thank our public officials and elected officials like join Lewis in thanking you all for making it out tonight. I know it's a busy time all over, and for you all to make the effort to come out is particularly valuable for you all to hear some of the information that we have tonight. I like to say that a foundation is only as good as its grantees, and we have a number of grantees, many grantees working on the Respect Big Bend program, and we're fortunate that several of them are here tonight, and I'd like to recognize them. David Ionelli is here with Hudson Pacific. He runs our media work and communications work. Of course, you know Billy and Lewis. Melinda Taylor is here from the UT School of Law. Blair Fitzsimmons is here from the Texas Agricultural Land Trust. And of course, Michael Young, you'll hear from in a few minutes. Is there anyone I didn't miss? I missed Kip Averett. Former Senator Kip Averett is not able to make it tonight. He was here earlier today, and he's instrumental in working on our public policy component of RBB, as we affectionately call it. So, is this better? I don't know, Lewis, if you went through this map, but just to clarify, tonight, the Respect Big Bend program that Lewis summarized is an effort that is particularly focused on the Tri-County area highlighted on the map here tonight. And that's what we're talking about in terms of energy development, both fossil fuels and renewables, and their associated infrastructure, including pipelines, roads, and transmission lines. So just to give you a picture of what we're talking about tonight, it's not necessarily the entire Trans-Pecos region from Midland westward. So some of you all may know that, of course, I work for the Cynthia and George Mitchell Foundation, and now the Mitchells' 10 children and untold numbers of grandchildren. You might know that Mr. Mitchell was an early pioneer in shale development. That has led to the Permian and the United States being the largest producer of oil in the world now. This is a picture, of course, of Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell in Galveston, their home. One impetus for the Respect Big Bend program, and my role here is really to tell you about why the foundation started this whole thing. And one reason was Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell's, but their passion for land conservation, community well-being, and energy development. And in 2012, at the last board meeting that Mr. Mitchell attended of the foundation, he admonished us, me as at the time their only staff person, and their 15 family member board, to address at the time in 2012, so this was 8 years ago, to address at the time the uncharacterized impacts of shale development. Shale development was occurring in places that had not seen oil and gas development before. The Eagle Ford, Utah, areas of Colorado that were becoming urbanized. Of course, it all started in Dallas, and so that urban area knew something about shale development. And of course, West Texas knows all about oil and gas development. But in 2016, we learned that this development was moving westward and southwestern, into new areas that, despite our familiarity with oil and gas in the Permian, it was happening perhaps in areas of the state, of the counties, this region, that hadn't seen development before. So going back to 2012, Mr. Mitchell at the board meeting, in a very Mr. Mitchell kind of way, asked us, and me and the board, to undertake an effort that he called shale sustainability, to try and ensure, to put together an effort to ensure that the benefits of increased use of particularly natural gas to displace carbon dioxide emitting coal, that those environmental and health benefits were maximized, but the environmental risks, increased water use, higher pressures at the wellhead, uses of chemicals that we hadn't seen before, more broadly dispersed areas of development in, again, some sensitive regions around the country that hadn't seen it before, that those impacts were minimized. And that's been sort of our marching orders for 8 years. So flash forward, or skip forward again to 2016. And what were we doing in 2016? We had worked on various regulatory efforts related to water and methane emissions from 2012 to 2016. But what did we read in September of 2016 in the Houston Chronicle? We read about the Alpine High. And not to pick on Apache and not to pick on Alpine High, because what we've seen since then is that it's not just the Alpine High. It's development throughout Reeves County, in Pecos, in areas that even in 2012 we're not seeing such intense development. And so I said to myself, literally, what happens in a region like on our map, like where you all live, when oil and gas development comes? What happens to a region like this when the growth of utility scale, being large solar installations and wind, comes to an area that is not used to seeing industrialization? What happens to the communities? What happens to the landscape? What happens to land values? What happens to aesthetics? What happens to ranching heritage culture? What happens to community well-being? What happens when you put a pipeline through to the border of US and Mexico? What happens when you build transmission lines through this region? Some of these activities benefit landowners, and we're all for it. Some of this infrastructure development benefits people in Houston who aren't paying the price of having their land taken through eminent domain for transmission and pipelines. What do you do in a region like this, characterized by small towns with lots of heritage that care deeply about the quality of their land and their well-being and their ability to determine for themselves what they want for their future? So this I ask myself, and why? Why would I do that? Of all the places in all the world that sees energy development, why this? So that's a little bit of a personal story that my friends here asked me to tell you, so I will. I'm from Midland. I grew up there. My dad was a petroleum engineer for ARCO for 35 years. And one of the charming things about growing up in Midland, if your parents will let you, you can get in the car on a Friday afternoon after school, and you can drive with your high school friends 3 hours north and spend the weekend up to no good in Paladura Canyon. Or you can drive west and create problems in the Guadalupes, or you can drive south and wreak havoc in the Big Bend National Park. And that's what we did while I was in high school. And I basically grew up, because we have a family ranch in Castro County in the Panhandle, I grew up going up and down Highway 385. So this region to me is deeply personal. My late husband and I spent our honeymoon out in the Big Bend National Park. We took the overnight train from Houston. My daughter, who just texted me, and I thought I shut that down. I did shut it down, but somehow she got through me anyway. Her name is Elena. She's very obnoxious right now. Her name's Elena, and she's named after St. Helena Canyon in the national park. So there are other stories that I could tell you about growing up out here and what it means to me to be the daughter of a petroleum engineer and having worked for the developer of shale technology for now 24 years and his family. To understand the value that clean energy, being natural gas or renewables, creates for the world, but the threats that it presents at the local level, and some at the global level too, in terms of climate change, if you are interested in that. But it creates opportunities for communities to have new opportunities for economic development, for landowners and mineral owners to prosper, for communities to have new resources, new infrastructure, new buildings, new hospitals, schools, etc. But the question is, and it remains, and what the RBB's sort of mission is, you all want to determine your future. You're self-determination kind of people. What science, information, data, I don't know, community outreach, training, what do you all need so that if, and we are not preparing anyone for inevitable energy development, Michael will tell you it may or may not come here. What information do you need that we can help provide at the foundation so that you can determine what's right for your communities, for your land, and for your friends, for your children? What do you need so that when energy comes knocking, you know what questions to ask, you have information, you can see what lessons have been learned in other regions that have suffered, grown, and suffered from boom and bust. I've seen firsthand the inflation in a community and a family and the dissolution of that community and that family in the bust period. My own dad was laid off in 1985. The golden parachute thing that just happened last week. It's still happening. 1985, it's still happening. 85 wasn't the first time, and this year won't be the last. What do we need to learn? And I think that I am committed that this region has so much to lose. I think more than any other region where oil and gas or renewables has ever been developed in the entire world. This region, where we are today, and you all have more to lose and more to gain by doing it right. So that's what our program's about. We at the foundation are committed to helping, and that begins with stakeholder and community engagement that Lewis and Billy are doing. It begins with communications that David and them are doing. But most importantly, because we're a science-based organization, it begins with science and data, and that's really about Michael Young and the Bureau. So with that, I will show you a trailer.